Hello and welcome to Thatcham, What's in a Name? I'm your host, Nick Young. In this talk, I will show you the origin of the place name Thatcham and what I think it means. I will show you how that name has developed over the centuries to what we have today. So before we get going, Thatcham is located in the Kennet Valley, roughly midway between London and Bristol on the A4, or the Great Western Road. Shown on the map are the present parish boundary in red and the 1761 boundary for the parish in blue. Now, something to be aware of when performing any historical research are the boundaries. The boundaries change across time. Bits added, bits taken away. Records may be contained within those parts that have been taken away or added. Thatcham has two main origin stories. They are often shared. The first is this. The people, having built the walls of their buildings, stood thinking how to roof their structures. A figure suddenly appeared, horned and with a tail, and shouted, "Thatcham!" There are variations on this, and I'm sure many of you will have heard at least one of those variations. And the second origin story is this. A Saxon chief called Tace established his village or his hamlet here, and thus we got Tace's Ham or Thatcham, which over the centuries has evolved into Thatcham. But as good historians, we want evidence, so let's take a look at what we actually have. So before we go any further, please forgive my pronunciation of Saxon here. I'm very likely going to get it wrong, and I apologise for that in advance. So shown on the screen is a copy of the will of a Saxon Earl, Elfaya. His will is dated 971 AD or thereabouts. He was lord of the manor of Thatcham and left the manor to King Edgar. Thatcham is noted here in his will, spelt with a Saxon fawn and an ash, and then Cham. So we would have got Thatcham. This is often said to be the first written record for Thatcham, but trawling through other Saxon records, in 951 AD there is another will where King Edred grants Thatcham to the Nuns' Minster at Winchester. This pushes the first written record back a couple decades. Can we go back any further? And this is where the archaeological records come in. For those unaware, do look at the ADS or the Archaeological Data Services website and the Portable Antiquities Scheme, both fantastic for archaeological and other finds. Anyway, in the case of Thatcham, excavations in 2005 on properties to the south of the parish church of St Mary's found a few pieces of Saxon material, Ipswich ware, found to date between the 8th and 9th centuries. And not too far away, there's other Saxon material believed to date to the 7th century. Although this doesn't give us a name, it does indicate there are Saxons in the area several centuries before that first written record. So it gives me hope that there may be more written records predating that 951. It has been suggested that Fayet was a chief's name, and that second origin story adjusted accordingly. However, in Saxon, Fayet means thatching material, and there's plenty of those materials throughout our local landscape. Ham refers to hamlet or homestead and so on. However, it has been suggested that ham, in this particular case at least, could have originally been a double M, meaning river meadow or similar. So Thatcham could have meant thatching material in or near a river meadow. So we've got a possible meaning of the original Thatcham or Thatcham. Moving forward, we get to Doomsday. If you have no other place to start, this is a good one, especially with the use of the Open Doomsday project. Thatcham is noted in Doomsday as being the centre of 100, an administrative area, but it's written as Thatcham, thus explaining where that second origin story comes from. Anyway, remember, the Norman people did not record in Anglo-Saxon, so presumably Thatcham, Taceham, is how they wrote the Saxon Thatcham. So moving forward, where do we look for evidence of the name Thatcham? I would suggest, generically speaking, have a look in any local history books. They may mention sources, they may even have photographs of those sources. Did your place name have a market? Do you know when it was established? You could look for a charter. Is there a borough charter, for example? Do you know who owned the manor Here on the screen we have a charter from Henry I regarding Reading Abbey, and within it mentions Thatcham. A few years later, and we have a charter from the Empress Matilda in around 1140. Further forward from around 1300, and we have a grant, again mentioning Thatcham, but note the spellings. Another grant in 1404. And on to 1446, we have a document here referring to Thomas Clark and what became known as Lowndes Charity. Now I could go on and on and on with all these documents, but you get the idea. Look at whatever documents you can, look for that name, make sure it is the one you're looking for by looking for other things it should fit in. So for example, does it mention the county you're in? Does it mention other nearby towns? And I say this because there may be other place names with very similar names to your own. Now continuing the search, I've created a list of every mention I can find of Thatcham, the source and the date. And there are ones that I have not noted down because I have not been able to confirm them. To see any patterns, I find visual better than just a list. So going along the chart route, we have all the name variations on the left, or the y-axis, the date at the bottom, the x-axis, and then against every date where I find a particular spelling, I put a dot, and then for every one, I connect the first and the last mention together with a line. And I find, for me at least, this helps to visualise and understand what's going on a little better. Some would appear to be transcription errors. Now, I was expecting to see a slow transition from one form of Thatcham to another and to another. And this is what's commonly been propagated in the local histories. Out of the 19 variations of the spelling of Thatcham, there are 4 that seem to be dominant. We have Thatcham from 951 to 975, covering the Old English. From 975 until Doomsday, I have found nothing, but I assume the old spelling would have continued. Despite Thatcham being written Thatcham in Doomsday, it isn't that seems to be dominant during that main period after the conquest. From 1086 to 1227, Tacheham seems to be the main spelling variation. Then we get from 1188 to 1784, Thatcham, Thacham. There is a brief overlap with the previous dominant spelling. Now this lasted an extremely long time, 6 centuries or thereabouts, and it can even be found in some of the early newspapers. The present spelling comes in around 1557. It is used simultaneously with the previous dominant spelling, so between 1557 and sometime around 1800, both of those in use simultaneously. Now, as I said previously, I was expecting a slow transition from one to the other. Instead, we get a couple of jumps. Most of the variations seem to be early in our history, before the 14th century, before the Great Vowel Shift. So how does this help us? In the case of Thatcham, we've got the earliest written reference back to 951, and we know through the archaeological record there is a possibility that there may be evidence before that. We've pushed the modern spelling back by about 30 years, and we've shown a possible meaning for Thatcham. Thatching material in a river meadow. More generically speaking, researching a place name and finding all the different variations can help you confirm if a document is referring to a specific place. So if you're looking through other wills and that, you may be able to look up, well, what was the spelling at this date? Is that the right document? Does that tie up? It might even be able to help you date documents. I hope it encourages you to go and find out about your place name. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.